Bug-Eyed Tales presents Ride or Die, Croc Attack by Lieutenant H.W. Bell of the Indian Army.
While I was staying at a place called Sangli, a city that sits at the heart of India's western Maharashtra and pulses with historical and agricultural vitality, an unexpected visitor, a local chief, came to see me. Sangli, with its enchanting mix of ancient allure and the economic hustle of turmeric, grape, and sugar industries, certainly holds its ground as a cornerstone of the regional agro-economy. However, as we sipped our tea, the chief unveiled a chilling account from his jurisdiction, equipped with all the necessary proofs and a statement from the man at the center of it all, casting a shadow over the pastoral charm of this vibrant locale. On the evening of September 26, 1911, Pira bin Satu Kagale, a resident of Katega on the banks of the river Krishna in the state of Miraj Senior, ventured to the river to fetch water as the sun set over the southern Maratha country. Pira had drawn his water and was standing in the river about thigh deep, when he suddenly felt something strike against one of his legs. He looked down to see what it was that had touched him, when, to his horror, he found that he had accidentally stepped on the back of a large crocodile. For the past 4 days, Pira had noticed a crocodile lurking near the riverbank at Pantu, the local Marathi term for the water-drawing spot. Yet he paid it little mind, a typical disregard among his community. However, this time, the crocodile made its presence alarmingly clear in a startling and unsettling way. As dusk set in, Pira was collecting water from the river, standing thigh-deep, when suddenly something struck his foot, and he toppled face-first into the water. Before he could process what was happening, a crocodile had clamped onto his leg and was dragging him underwater. He was pulled roughly 40 yards before the crocodile surfaced, allowing Pira a desperate breath of air. Though he could breathe again, the terror was far from over, as the crocodile maintained its grip. By this time, he was half dead with fright and nearly drowned, and must have fainted. When he recovered consciousness, he found he was in what he calls the crocodile's house, which appears to have been a sort of cave under the riverbank with a smooth, muddy bottom. He afterwards computed he had been unconscious for a night and a day before his senses returned to him. Now, as his brain cleared, he became aware of the horrible fact that the crocodile was on his back, with its tail over his head and its mouth at his feet, where it was apparently making a meal off one of his heels. Shortly afterwards, the brute left off feeding and went away. The unfortunate man says that as he lay there in that awful cave, he prayed to his gods, Dattatreya and Krishna, to save him from his terrible predicament. After an hour or so, while he was still praying, the crocodile returned. The man lay still, and shortly afterwards the brute departed again, having only sniffed at his victim. Some time elapsed, and the crocodile did not return. So, thinking he was fairly safe, the man began to examine his surroundings to discover if there was any possibility of escape. The cave was in total darkness, and so he had to rely on his sense of touch. First of all, he moved forward a couple of yards and groped about until he put his hand into some soft, wet mud. Encouraged by the fact that he had been left so long alone, Pira crawled farther forward and put his hand into some water. Evidently, he was getting nearer to the river. However, this was an ominous sign for the distressed man. The crocodile, which had been lying dormant at the cave's entrance, suddenly noticed him. It quickly returned and forcefully swept him into the river with a powerful lash of its tail. While the man was struggling in the water, the crocodile dived, and Pira suddenly felt it rising beneath him. This movement brought him upon its back. Finding his hands were on the mugger's head, and nerved by his desperation, he felt for the nostrils and hung on to them as hard as he could. Meanwhile, he made his seat as secure as his remaining strength permitted by twining his legs as far as possible under the monster's stomach. And now comes the most exciting part of the adventure, the story of the unfortunate man's unique ride. Pira found that if each time the crocodile attempted to dive, he pulled upon its nostrils hard enough, it promptly came to the surface. Needless to say, he made the best possible use of this discovery. The brute, after trying without success to dislodge its rider, shot off like lightning towards the center of the river, where it proceeded to travel up and down the stream at a furious pace for about an hour. The man recognized his whereabouts by the light of the moon and knew that he was in the Chawadeshwar Nala, which runs into the Krishna, not far from his home. Towards dawn, the crocodile became somewhat exhausted, but still continued its evolutions in the middle of the river. Once it tried to make for its lair, but the man promptly pulled its nostrils towards the opposite shore, and so managed to keep in deep water. He had the sense to understand that if once he was taken to dry ground, his chances of escape would be very small, and all he could hope for was rescue by some men coming down to the river to bathe or fetch water in the early morning. And it was thus he was eventually saved. As soon as the sun rose, Pira spied 2 men working in a field near the riverbank and shouted as loudly as his weak state would permit in order to attract their attention. At first he was not heard, but after calling 2 or 3 times, the younger of the men looked up and saw him. By this time, the crocodile was scarcely moving. The younger man told the other that there was someone in the river calling for help, and both came to the bank and asked Pira who he was and why he was calling. With that, the man pulled the crocodile's snout upwards, for by this time he was almost too weak to articulate. The other men then recognized him and asked where he had been since Sunday night. He was being searched for all down the riverside, they said. By way of answer, Pira called out for a rope. The men on shore now noticed the mugger's head for the first time, and were very much alarmed and astonished. Their cries that "Pira is riding a crocodile" brought a crowd of wondering friends to the riverbank, and one man, who recovered his wits more quickly than the others, ran for a rope, while the remainder tried to reach the victim by tying their pagarees or headdresses together and throwing one end towards him. The crocodile, hearing the noise, became alarmed and started at a brisker pace to go downstream. Eventually, it arrived at a watering place where 4 men were waiting with a long rope. By pulling the crocodile's snout in their direction, Pira managed to get close enough to catch the end of the rope when it was thrown to him. He made it as secure as he could round one of his arms, and then jumped off his uncomfortable mount. Those on the bank pulled him in as fast as they could and carried him off to be medically treated. On examination, the poor fellow's legs and arms were found to be in a frightfully lacerated condition. After a few months, however, he began to regain his strength and slowly recovered from his terrible experience. He is now able to get about again and suffers very little from the trying time he spent as a crocodile's guest. He declares that he will never forget those awful 2 nights and a day as long as he lives. After Pira received medical attention, a search was conducted for the mugger crocodile. However, it had not returned to its lair and has not been seen since. The man himself declares that as soon as he jumped off its back, the croc turned over and sank. This would leave one to suppose that it died, possibly from mingled fright and exhaustion, and the fact of its not having been seen again goes a long way to confirm this belief. For a dead crocodile always sinks and is carried under water by the current of the river.